Hello everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Dayspring Discussions. I'm your host, Sean McGahee, and this is a show where we talk about movies, TV, sci-fi, fantasy, comic books. If you geek out about it, we're going to talk about it. Welcome back from a little bit of a break here. I hope you had a great 4th of July. I was here at the house, had the family over, we grilled out, went and saw some fireworks. Overall, really good time. Took a couple days off. I tried to squeeze one in, but it was just a little bit too busy, so couldn't get a chance to do that. But I did want to squeeze one in before tonight, because tonight is the premiere of Spider-Man Homecoming. The premiere for Spider-Man Homecoming was last week. Reviews have been coming out. People love the movie. They're excited about the movie. And overall, I think it's going to be a great experience. I'm going tomorrow night with Lisa and Josh and his girlfriend. So you can be sure that we're going to get a review out sometime this weekend. I'm not sure when yet, though. But definitely going to get it out because I want to talk about it. I want to know what you guys thought about it, and we'll try to squeeze one in. So today, like I said, I want to try to get one in because I want to talk about Spider-Man in general. That's right. There's been a lot of stuff going on these last couple weeks in regards to the Spider-Verse with Sony and Marvel and all this stuff going on. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about it and kind of review and also kind of critique what's been going on in the world of Spidey. Alright, so before we get started, I figure I'd give you a little bit of background as far as my Spider-Man expertise. I'm not really a big fan of the character, but my brother is a huge fan. So through him, I like to think I know a little bit more than the average bear when it comes to Spider-Man. Of course, I did watch the old 90s animated cartoon series with him on Saturday mornings. It was right before or right after Batman and X-Men. So I watched a lot of Spider-Man that way. Honestly, when it comes to Spider-Man comics, I haven't really read any or gotten into any since Brand New Day. I know that was kind of a thing where they kind of wiped out about 20 years worth of Spider-Man stories and started over because that's what they wanted to do to set it up for the movies. That's a whole separate issue as far as comics compared to movies. But in any event, I have enjoyed recently the Renew Your Vows series they have going on, where it's Spider-Man and he's married to Mary Jane, and they have a kid, and they're kind of like a superhero family. I have enjoyed that, so if you haven't checked that out, I recommend going with that. But of course, Homecoming takes place the beginning years of Spider-Man and all this. So something came out yesterday. There was a story by Marvel Studios Kevin Feige, who actually came out and kind of revealed their plan for Spider-Man over the next couple years. He talked to the Toronto Sun, and he said basically that they're planning a 5-movie story arc for Spider-Man that started with last year's Captain America Civil War. He said, quote, "We're looking at a 5-movie storyline: Civil War, Homecoming, Avengers Infinity War, the Untitled Avengers 4th film, and Homecoming 2, or whatever we end up calling it, as an amazing 5-story journey for Peter Parker. In the way that the events of Civil War directly inform the beginning of Homecoming and his state of mind as he goes back to high school, so too will the events of the next 2 Avengers movies as he continues with high school. This original 22-movie arc ends with the Untitled Avengers in May of 2019, and then 2 months later it will be Peter and Spider-Man that ushers us into the aftermath and how things will proceed in the MCU from there." So I read this yesterday, and for me, it was kind of a huge story because it kind of says that the future of the MCU is Spider-Man, I think, in my opinion, is what he's trying to say. There have been a lot of speculation as far as what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to do after the 4th Avengers film, because it's kind of the end game. We don't know what they're planning after that film. Well, we know from this that the film they have on the slate after that 4th Avengers film is going to be the Homecoming sequel, set to come out July 5th, 2019. Now, beyond that, we don't know what heroes are going to survive in Avengers Infinity War or the 4th film, and what exactly the shape of the Marvel Universe, Cinematic Universe, is going to be after that 4th Avengers film. But we know at the end of it, Spider-Man's still around, it looks like. We know he might be leading the charge for a whole new breed of, superheroes. He might be almost like the Iron Man, so to speak, of the next step of the MCU. But that event is really the way he had it. I like how, again, Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios, the reason they succeed is they focus on their characters, and they're doing a good job. They have the character of Spider-Man mapped out for the next couple years. They know his character journey. They know what he's going to go through. And to me, I love hearing that they have a plan. They know we're going not only with the character, but also, again, the MCU. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why they've succeeded so much in the industry. Now, we can sit here and talk about how Kevin Feige has all these plans for Spider-Man, but let's not forget, actually, kids, that Sony is the studio that still technically owns the rights to make Spider-Man movies. And they're not, fading in the background. Of course, Spider-Man is in the MCU in Homecoming, but I feel like the people over Sony still want to make it clear that they still own the rights to Spider-Man. A couple weeks ago or 2 weeks ago or whatever, Amy Pascal and Kevin Feige were sitting down and doing some questioning or interviews for promoting Spider-Man Homecoming, and Amy Pascal kind of hinted at the fact that their spin-off films, the Venom and Black Cat and Silver Sable films they're planning on doing, do take place in the MCU, in which case, like a day or two later, she went back and kind of basically retracted it, almost is what it is. Now, Kevin Feige was sitting right next to her and kind of looked over at her, I guess. There was a look and might have, let something slip out that she shouldn't have. So for those who don't know, Sony is planning a Venom solo film and a Black Cat and Silver Sable film called Silver and Black. Now, the Hollywood Reporter reported by Sony Studio CEO Tim Rothman is that they're also planning other Spider-Man characters such as Kraven the Hunter and Mysterio to get their own films too. And then they also kind of talked about how Carnage is going to be the villain in the Venom spin-off film. So let's just talk about this just for a little bit and kind of get a grasp of what Sony's trying to do here. Back when Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, if you saw that film, which I don't think anyone should ever really see that movie, you could definitely tell they were hinting that they wanted to expand the world. There were talks of a Venom spin-off film back then. There were talks of a Sinister Six movie. They were trying to make a Spider-Man cinematic universe, because that's the thing. Marvel Studios has done something so amazing in, taking all these franchises and putting them together and making one world. And it's been so successful for them that everyone wants to emulate it. They want to copy it. You see DC doing it over at Warner Brothers. You see Universal doing it with their Monsters universe. You see, Sony wanted to do it with their Spider-Man. The problem is they failed. Amazing Spider-Man 2, not a success. And Sony got in a little bit of trouble with some email leaks, and they were at the point of where they were going to lose, a lot of money, and something had to be done. So I'm not sure how the deal brokered, but Marvel Studios got, the okay to use Spider-Man in the MCU. I think really, I'm not sure who would have approached who first in that one. If Kevin Feige, threw out a life preserver and say, hey, let me help you, or Sony came to Marvel and say, hey, please help us, because we both know this is going to help Sony so much, Spider-Man being in the MCU. They've already got the established characters, all the momentum, they make good movies. Putting Spider-Man in the MCU is the best thing Sony could have done, or decision they could have made, or deal they could have made, even though we're not quite sure what exactly consisted of how many pictures and rights and stuff like that. We do know, allegedly, that some information that came out the last couple of days is that Sony does get all the film profits from Spider-Man Homecoming, but Marvel Studios, aka Disney, will get merchandising profits. So yeah, it seems kind of like a raw deal for Marvel Studios and Disney, but when you think about all the Spider-Man toys they're going to sell and all the lunch boxes, I think they're going to make out okay in this deal. Now, Sony Studios, again, they still, as much as we see Spider-Man in the MCU, they still want to make their own Spider-Verse. They want to, try to continue what they did. But the problem is, for the next several years, as we can tell from, Kevin Feige's comments is that Spider-Man's going to be around for a while in the MCU. They got plans for him for the next couple of years, and imagine at least for, the foreseeable future. So how does Sony plan on making a Spider-Man cinematic universe without Spider-Man? Well, they've already got a animated movie coming out. I think it's the end of next year, but that's going to be with Miles Morales, the other Spider-Man they got in the universe. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to do. The smart thing, of course, would be to keep these characters in the MCU, much like how the Netflix series take place in the MCU. Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, they're in New York, the same place that, Stark Tower, Avengers Tower, and all these other characters are, but they're kind of on a different side of it to where I always said, the Avengers save the world, the Defenders save the neighborhood. So the Avengers don't really deal with the things the Defenders do. The Defenders more street level, so that's why really their paths don't cross quite as much. With the Spider characters, you can kind of do the same thing, but again, it's going to be hard to try to explain a Venom character without explaining Spider-Man. Now, you can totally put him in there, but I don't know. It's all one confusing mess as far as if they decide to go with a Venom and Kraven Hunter and all this other junk without Tom Holland Spider-Man or a Spider-Man to help support them. Because really that's what it is, right? The Venom, Black Cat, Silver Sable, Kraven Hunter, all these are supporting Spider-Man characters. And the reason they work so well a lot of times is because of their interactions with Spider-Man, the main character. Much like you could say, let's do a recent example. Oh, Minions. A lot of people like the Despicable Me franchise, and in those movies they liked the Minions. But then the Minions got their own movie, and a lot of people were like, well, this doesn't work. Because a lot of times when you take a supporting character and make them the star, it doesn't work. There are some characters, people have been saying they want a Black Widow movie or a Hawkeye movie. But there are some that will argue, okay, but she doesn't work as a main character. I think she would. That's neither here nor there. But she's a great supporting character. That's, I think, where her strong suit is. And she can continue to be a supporting character, a part of the group for all these MCU films. And I think it'll work, and I don't mind if she ever gets her own film. I think it would be awesome. I could definitely see it happening. I could definitely see it being interesting, especially with the current comic that Mark Waid is writing, the Black Widow comic he's doing. You could definitely do it in something in that style. I think it would work. But she's a great supporting character, so if she doesn't get her own film, I'm okay with that because she works so well in other people's films. Plus, let's not forget, with the Spider-Man characters, these are villains, okay? DC made this big deal about how Suicide Squad was going to be about the villains, and these are about the bad guys. And I'm sorry, but that's crap, okay? If you watch Suicide Squad, you can justify every one of those characters as a good guy, whether they got a raw deal or they're just, doing it for the money or something like that. Not one of those characters, except for maybe the Joker, was a straight up, hey, I want to kill people because it's fun, or I want to rob people because it's fun. Every one of those people had a reason for doing what they're doing. They were misfits. They weren't villains, they were misfits. Let's just call it like it is, okay? So taking, again, villains, I don't think it's interesting. I'm sorry, I've never been a guy that's interested in villains or anti-heroes. That's not what I'm into. I like my Captain America, I like my Superman, I like my Cyclops. Those are my guys because to me, it's more interesting for a person to choose to do the right thing rather than do the wrong thing, aka the easy thing. But that's just me. So to take these villains, I don't think most people will find them interesting enough. Mysterio, straight up villain. I can't find him that interesting. Kraven's a little different. Kraven is just kind of the ultimate hunter, and he's hunting Spider-Man as kind of the ultimate prey. So I can see an angle where that might be interesting because the character's got layers. Mysterio, not so many layers. I don't see that happening. Silver Sable and Black Cat. I know Black Cat a little more than I know Silver Sable. Excuse me, Silver Sable. There, I got it right. But Black Cat, I can see how a movie with her might work if given the right angle. Venom is a whole different thing, okay? And I'm going to probably spend the rest of the time talking about the Venom film, okay? The Venom they're going with is Eddie Brock, the original Venom, and they're going to do Carnage as his villain, allegedly, who is Cletus Cassidy, I believe was his name. Yes, Cletus Cassidy. He is actually a guy who was in prison with Eddie Brock, and when the symbiote came to rebond with Eddie Brock, he refused him, but bonded with him, and they escaped anyway, but left a piece of him behind, which Cassidy then bonded with and became Carnage. So kind of the yin to his yang, a piece of Venom, so to speak. Now, I was listening recently to one of my favorite film commentators, John Campea, and he was talking about this, how Carnage is, the perfect villain for a Venom film, and I gotta strongly disagree. He gave comparisons about how, if you make a Superman film, you start off with his greatest villain, Lex Luthor. Batman, you start out with Joker. Daredevil, you have Kingpin, etc., etc. There's a big difference there, though, because Batman has a very famous rogues gallery of villains that he can tackle after the Joker. Same thing with Superman. I thought it was a huge mistake in Man of Steel to make Zod and these Kryptonians the first villains that he faces off against, because after you've beaten a gang or an army of Kryptonians, how do you up the stakes from there? And it's kind of the same thing with Venom. Venom is, like I said, mainly a villain, right? He has some heroic qualities in him, but he's mainly a villain, and he faces off against Carnage. Name me another character that Venom can go against that is not Carnage. Anyone? I mean, I'm not well versed in Venom mythology, at least the Eddie Brock character, but starting off with your greatest threat, okay, if you want to do a one-off film, that's great, but what are you going to do for the sequel? I mean, honestly, it's just like with Man of Steel. They start off with Zod, and they're like, okay, where do they go from there? Well, let's have him face off against Batman. And what? So we're going to have him face off against Spider-Man? You should have already had that confrontation already. There are some saying that in the Avengers Infinity War or the fourth Avengers film, when they go to outer space or wherever to fight Thanos, that it'd be a great idea if that's where Spider-Man picked up the symbiote that he bonded with, which later became Venom. And I think that would be a great idea, but you need to have that confrontation between Venom and Spider-Man already set before you have Carnage, at least in my opinion. You got to have Spider-Man take down Venom, throw Eddie Brock in prison, and then, you'll get Carnage. You blow your load in the first movie, it's downhill from there. Not that Man of Steel, I've, again, a lot of issues with Man of Steel, but there are also some good things about it too. Continuing on to Batman v Superman, I liked the Ultimate Cuts story-wise, so I'm not saying it's a completely bad idea. Obviously, these people who make these movies are smarter than I am. Some of them, I think. But, I don't know, I just see Carnage as a bad way to go with it. But to be honest, to become 100% honest, I think a Venom film starring Eddie Brock is completely the wrong Venom they're doing. Venom came out in the 90s. He was this anti-Spider-Man. He looked kind of like monstrous and cool, and it was back when of course the 90s, when all the rage was the anti-heroes such as Wolverine and Batman, and they're still popular, Spawn, all those characters, and again, they're still popular, but in the 90s it was like accelerated. I blame Jim Lee because of his awesome artwork mostly for it, but that's neither here nor there. To me, I think the much more compelling character is Flash Thompson. He is, I guess, the current Venom they have going on right now, or was. I don't know what the status of that is. But with his storyline, okay, say Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock is a guy who doesn't like Peter Parker or Spider-Man. So when Spider-Man rejects the symbiote suit, he bonds with Brock. They have that in common, and that's where you get kind of the villainous angle of Venom. Okay, great, whatever. With Flash Thompson, this guy is a war veteran who loses his legs in battle, and in order to serve his country more, he bonds with the alien symbiote to do good with something that is essentially evil. And as he has the suit on, the more he wears it, or the longer he goes wearing it, the more out of control, the more angry he gets, the more it brings out his evil nature. That is a much more compelling story than whatever the hell Eddie Brock's story would be. I'm sorry, but a war veteran who, still wants to serve and is fighting deeper impulses and, wants to do good, that is so much more interesting to me than whatever the hell Eddie Brock would be. That's the Venom story that you do. Not to mention the fact that they could easily do that storyline without bringing in Spider-Man. If you read the first storyline of that Venom comic with Flash Thompson, Spider-Man I don't think is anywhere in it. And they could really just say, hey, we found this alien symbiotes that, is kind of makes people have superpowers. Do you want to do it? You don't even have to mention Spider-Man, really. I mean, it'd be nice because Venom is tied so tightly to Spider-Man to mention him or have him in the film. And that's another thing, too, with this Venom film. If you don't have Spider-Man in this film at all, I think it's going to be a bust to begin with. But at least the Flash Thompson route, I think there's enough compelling storyline there to do it without Spider-Man. Okay, well, that's it for me today, guys. I got to get dressed and get ready for work. So tell me what you think. Do you think it's a good idea for Sony to do these standalone Spider-Man supporting characters? I mean, do you think it'll work? I'm very questionable on it, to be honest, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, of course, be on the lookout for a Spider-Man Homecoming review. Go see the film this weekend and then watch our review because it is full of spoilers. I never hold back on spoilers because I don't want to, sway you about going to see the film. I want to have a discussion about the film and go back and forth and see what you thought, see what I thought, and we'll just have a good old time enjoying this film, which from what I hear is going to be a great time. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get another show out this weekend minus the review. So if not, I'll try to put some out Monday. If not, then definitely Tuesday. Lots of stuff to talk about, and we'll go from there, guys. So hit me up, dayspringdiscussions@gmail.com. Also find us on the Facebook group or on Twitter. And find me personally on Twitter and Instagram at Slim, that's SLYM, Dayspring12. So, until next time, guys, may the Force be with us all.